Welcome back to the Scale Forward podcast. I'm your host, Russell. Today, I'm joined by Michael Buckbee, the CEO and founder of Nowatowa. Michael's built a product that helps companies monitor, understand, and fix how they show up in AI search. Michael, thanks for jumping on today. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
So Nowatowa, interesting name. Can you take us back to the early days when we were previously speaking? You didn't set out to start Nowatowa. You were kind of scratching your own itch. But rather than me tell everybody, do you mind telling us how you got started with Nowatowa and what it is?
Yeah, sure. So my current co-founder and I were working on a different product, a cybersecurity product. And we had a startup we'd been working on for a while. And with that, I think like a lot of other founders, we had built a community. So a community of other SaaS founders and people building things. And, we're regularly talking to them. And one day, almost as a joke, we're like, hey, ChatGPT's out. We should put our company names in it. And we all put our names in. And of course, sort of hilariously got things wrong, but some things were right. And I didn't really think much of it. But that night, I just sort of like couldn't get out of my head, like, oh, this was at least interesting, this sort of stuff. So I wrote a script on my Mac, just literally a single file script that hit OpenAI's API and spit out a CSV that I then put in a Google Sheet just to see like, oh, here's some basic questions about my company, about what I was doing. And I did that for a few of my founder friends and sent it off to them and then didn't really think much of it. But a few of them had as part of their onboarding hey, how'd you hear about us email? Or they would ask that. And those founders were the first early signs of ChatGPT doing something really interesting, where they started getting people saying like, oh, I found you on ChatGPT. ChatGPT recommended you. It did a bunch of research. You came up. And so they got back to me and said, hey, Mike, can we get that CSV again? Can we get an update of that? Can we do this? And, a lot of incremental updates from there. But, over the course of months, it just grew and grew and grew. And so last month, we actually processed more than 1 million questions through all the different services, across all of our different customers and prospects. So quite a big scale up from the CSV stage.
1 million questions. That's a milestone.
Yeah, it's been very interesting as well, even from, of course, everyone thinks everything's going to be easy. And so we started off with like, oh, we're going to hit the API. It's going to return us results. We'll parse that. It's very straightforward. And what we found was, you can't trust any of these services to be like active and working constantly, which is a real issue. You can't trust a lot of the responses. Like there's a whole maturation process we had to do on the development side to make all of this work at scale.
Right. And I think by now I'm confident in saying probably 99% of us has ChatGPT'd our own name. I was about to say Googled our own name, but ChatGPT'd our own name.
Yeah.
What showed up when you do that now?
A lot of stuff about Nowatowa, a lot of stuff about my previous startups, and it's constantly evolving. And I think another real change is even, we don't have great terminology for these things. Like we say like, oh, well, are we checking the AI models or are we checking these AI search services? And of course, we're kind of dancing around like, to what extent is ChatGPT a Google substitute? And, are things changing? And the answer is all the above constantly. So there's a really interesting piece that came out from Sam Altman. Like he was describing like how different generations are using ChatGPT, and the older generations are using it as a Google substitute. And then like the younger you get, the more it becomes a confidant and, something that people are asking like almost as a therapist or life coach. Should I make these decisions? And I think that is something categorically different than just like, a replacement for Google search.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, like how to boil an egg, that sort of stuff. It's like my niece, I remember my niece told me that's what she asked ChatGPT how to do that. So do you see it, how in-depth are the results getting at these days? Because obviously ChatGPT been around. Are we still surface level with some of these results? Are we way off? What's the percentage of accuracy if I Googled my business and I've done no optimization for AI at all? Sorry.
No. Well, I think there's two parts to it. One of which is, I think we're really talking about is hallucinations. I mean, everyone is concerned about that. And it's not even so much that it's inaccurate, but it says something like, do you do business in California as a company? And that's usually not like an SEO question. That's more like a business objection question or like a qualification question. And depending upon your business, that's very important to get right. And there's two types of hallucinations. There's hallucinations, which are a lack of knowledge, and it's just not in the the AI's model. And then there's hallucinations that are like due to logical fallacies that, it's chaining together a bunch of thoughts and then it's coming to some weird conclusion. And the first is very easy for us to deal with as marketers. We can just like put out statements. So if you identify like 5 out of 10 of these things I'm checking are wrong, it's very easy as a marketer. I can just go put out a page for each of those spots on my site and deal with them and overcome those and, show up better to my prospects. A term that a customer gave to us was ChatGPT is now our most popular and least well-trained company representative. And if you think about it, that makes sense that people are asking ChatGPT all these weird questions all the time. And if it doesn't get them right, then they don't even really consider you to be part of that. I've worked with a lot of like SaaS businesses in very like highly regulated areas. So common questions like, are you HIPAA certified? Do you have SOC 2 compliance? Like these kind of qualifying questions. And again, if the answer is no, then you just don't get the business. So, yeah.
Right. And out of the million questions that you guys seen, did you get a chance to analyze those quite deeply yet? Was there anything that surprised you so far about the answers?
I think the most surprising thing, so the majority of those questions are what we would consider to be competitive questions. So there's, questions of sentiment, like, hey, is this a good company? There's questions of sort of business knowledge, which is like, hey, are you HIPAA compliant? Then there's questions of competition, which is like, hey, who's the best in this category? And so most of these questions are competitive. And I think the real interesting thing is there is a divergence from what comes up in traditional search. And so to me, that means there's opportunity here. There's opportunity if you're a smaller brand, you're a growth brand that's trying to go up against incumbents, that there's opportunity here, or at the very least, niche opportunity to win in ChatGPT or Claude or these different services as search, continues to fracture and become more and more of a different beast than it's been.
Yeah, beast is a good way to put it. It's quite difficult to, I would say, crack the code of SEO these days. I mean, search everywhere optimization is the nice buzzword that's been getting around for the last, 6 or 7 months. You're talking to a lot of SEOs about this tool, right? What are some of them? What are some of their responses? How have they been receiving the Nowatowa?
I think people are a little desperate, and I think justifiably so, because there's a lot of changes that are happening. And so how I view this, and I don't know if this is how you view it, but really ChatGPT came out, terrified Google internally. Google in turn turned around and said, we're going to go all in on Gemini and we're going to go all in on AI overviews, which are powered by Gemini. And because of that chain of events, it kind of doesn't matter. Like we could pretend like ChatGPT and all these other services don't exist and it's just Google. Even the changes just Google has made are large enough that SEOs need to rethink their content strategy. They need to rethink their mix of like, if you're an SEO, I think that means something real different today than it did 2 years ago. Like the breadth of services you need to think about and the breadth of billing and strategies for your clients. Here's an example. Like currently we think of marketing as very siloed. And I've worked in big enterprises and it's often this way. Like there's a social team, there's a search team, there's a, paid team, and AI search is really blowing down the walls between these where, if you write something that goes on your site, that's great, but you also need to distribute it to social. So you need to, so OpenAI has a $13 billion relationship with Microsoft. Microsoft owns LinkedIn. Part of that deal is that OpenAI gets access to LinkedIn data. So it makes a lot of sense that if you write an article on your site, you should also publish that article on your LinkedIn. That doesn't normally fit in with the normal social plans of a lot of companies, which want to make like, oh, I'm going to make a nice carousel of 5 images. Like, no, please republish this article. Don't worry about a duplicate content penalty. Please get these words out in as many different places that say we're a good company, that we're solving these problems. And that's a different strategy. And to, track all of that and to think about it and to put the pieces together is a new set of skills. And again, I think it's an opportunity for SEOs.
Right. So yeah, it's an interesting, we should definitely be optimizing our content differently than what we used to, right? Like trying to optimize it for these LLMs. Do you have any insights on the best way to do this yet?
Sure. So I wrote a framework called the Biscuit Framework, which is not particularly about like my company or our service, but it's just a way to think about how to get your hands around all of this in a way that, you can easily convey to people and that is all directionally positive, which I think is a big thing because there's a lot of change. You don't want to you don't want to propose something real risky to a client or, in your own business that could fall on its face. So it's a lot of like, hey, let's get some basic technical things right. Let's make sure all of the different AI services can crawl our site. Like if it can't crawl your site, you're going to lose a huge leverage point in terms of influencing them. And there's a lot of people that have something like Cloudflare in place, that have some kind of web application firewall or security plugin they put in their WordPress, and they never even really thought like, oh, this is now going to influence this. And, for 2 decades, we basically said like 90% of search is Google, maybe 10% is Bing. And now we're seeing there's, we actually check 24 different AI bots from that could potentially be interacting with your site. And a lot of those are ones like there's one called Common Crawl, which a lot of the different providers take the data from that and use to build their models. If you can get in a Common Crawl, that's a win across like 4 or 5 different services. And, Google has an extended bot now. A lot of people are letting through Googlebot normally, blocking extended, which gets them out of AIOs, which gets them out of Gemini results. So there's some strategy there. And I think the other big content strategy that the Biscuit Framework goes into is, trying to hit some of the pieces of sentiment that, you want the AI models to think well of you because it brings a lot more of that into the answers than traditional search. An example I bring up is a bank in the US, Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo had the largest Federal Trade Commission fine ever because they were doing horrible things to people's accounts. And ChatGPT remembers that. So if you ask like, hey, should I bank with Wells Fargo or this other company? ChatGPT will say like, oh, do an ethical review of them before you do that. And that's not something that comes up in traditional search. In traditional search, you get like, oh, where's the nearest like Wells Fargo ATM, how to open a checking account kind of stuff. And then, for content, if you're a SaaS, there's a lot of SEO games that were around trying to bring in traffic. Those low intent but high volume traffic that would then come to your site, read an educational article, and then maybe you get them on a newsletter. Maybe they'd have some brand affinity when you did send them a message and things. And that playbook is just rapidly going away because Google has changed how they interact with the internet, where they're just sending less traffic, they're keeping more of it themselves. And so content wise, what we really want to see people do is live more in the middle and bottom of the funnel and less at the top. Because even if it's a situation where you have a very highly trafficked, low intent keyword that there's an AI overview for, and you're still in the sidebar, you're still in the sources of it, does it really matter if you're one of 30 sources in this, So, we want people to put the work in where the money is, and that's in the middle and the bottom of the funnel, so that when there is a search journey that, goes from like, hey, like I'm from cybersecurity background, like what's a web application firewall? Is this the right thing for me? What are some good ones? What's the one for my site? I'd want it to recommend my own stuff. And that's really where I want to win, is at that bottom of that funnel.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. So top of funnel stuff you think is slowly getting phased out or not really worth going after anymore?
I don't even know about slowly. Like,
yeah, good point.
Like, so just saying nothing exists but Google. We just do that thought experiment. Google's AI overviews have been seen by over 1 billion people. Like they've stated that in their quarterly calls. Like that's mainstream. And, so much of that is doing, like, I'm sure everyone in your audience is adept at making a Google search, looking at the top 5, 6 answers, piecing together a couple of them to like what looks trustworthy and to sort of synthesize an answer. And that's really what an AI overview is. And so, they have just taken over. And what I hear from SEOs just over and over again is I have clients that when they look in Google Search Console, their impressions have stayed steady. That's the same number of people making searches for their terms, but the click-through rates have just fallen to, and that's pretty clear. That's what's occurring is, the introduction of an AI overview to a keyword that you were trying to rank for is at a minimum, probably a 60% drop in the traffic that you receive from that. And that's a new world for us to live in. So,
and navigate.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we touched on this. I'm just making sure that we have clearly sort of explained who Nowatowa is for and who your ICP is. So I guess for those listening, are you able to touch more about how Nowatowa is helping solve these problems? Who is exactly for, and who have you seen being best receptive to it when you've gone out into the market?
Yeah. So, I think like most startups, we started with a plan and a direction and sort of ran into a wall, which is that we started with thinking like, oh, this is going to be like SaaS founders and CMOs and people like us that worked with, large brands internally, and we would use this to track and do these things. What we've rapidly found out is that most of the traction we were getting was actually from agencies. And like, even when I say agency, I really mean someone who is doing SEO and marketing on behalf of, a set of clients. And they're the people that are educating their clients. They're looking for tools for them. They are looking to stay on top of things. And, they're always looking to expand their book of business. Here's the different services we offer. And so our early adopters were all primarily agencies because it was a very easy upsell for them to say like, oh, well, we've always managed your SEO and now we're offering this new service and there's some more cost with it, but it gets you set up for the future. And that was the pitch from 6 months ago. And I think the pitch today is like, hey, you need to get on board with this or you're going to just have like massive issues. Or defensively, you've seen a big drop in organic traffic. Here's why. And it helps to like justify we're still doing the same things. We're still providing value. And, here's just a different way to look at it and what's happening. So,
right. What's some of the biggest things brands need to be thinking about when it comes to showing up in the search results of AI? What are like the three main things that they absolutely should have?
I think one, they should have a very clear idea of what they consider their sales objections and not so much marketing, but literally like talk to your sales team. Here's the objections that people have. Make sure that the answers to those are what you want as a brand to show up in AI search. And a great place to start is, hey, give me a description of my business. Tell me the features of it, tell me all about it and see if that matches reality. And that's a great place to start. Second, I would focus on at least doing a few reputational type searches, which is, hey, is this a good company to work for? Are they ethical? Are they trustworthy? And a lot of times, you might find a company that is like, oh, like they have a great Glassdoor score, for themselves, but turns out like the CFO went around and forced every employee to make, a review of it. And so that sort of stuff comes out like, hey, like they have a good reputation, but it's been manipulated. Like that's something that could come out. So you want to make sure all that is set. And then I think at the very least, you want to at least look in these services and see how you stack up against your top 5 competitors. And that could be, a one-on-one query. That could be what's the best in this category. And those are the 3 areas that you're just trying to get your head around. And that's what Nowatowa does is we automate, checking all these services and managing all this different information. And, if you can get your head around all that, I think it does become very clear what the next steps are in terms of actions to take. And that's really what we're trying to do to differentiate ourselves is that we've, our internal phrase is like actions beat analytics. And, it's so easy to get analytics, but, if you can really get in a good cadence of actions, get a good prioritization of that, you can do the work and you can win in that way, even if the attribution isn't there because it gets fuzzier every single year, every single month as, the big services pull back data from us. But if you can make the bottom line revenue numbers go up, the rest of it's okay.
Yep. Speaking of actions, how are you going about marketing Nowatowa today? What's your best acquisition channel or marketing channel?
So I think honestly, the best one we've had so far is me going on podcasts and trying to be an SEO influencer. Have had a lot of success in that because I think AI is a hot topic. And so lots of people are interested in it. And this is not something I was entirely comfortable doing at the start of this. And even as, I'd classify myself as an introvert, it's been a lot of fun just talking to people. And, we've gotten a lot of really good feedback about the business itself from podcasters and these conversations. And so we've done a lot of that. And we've done a lot of just going to conferences. I've been to a number of like pretty big SEO conferences. I was at SEO Week in New York. There's a tech SEO conference in Raleigh, went to Spark Together in Seattle at the end of last year. And from that got a lot of early adopters and a lot of like very deep feedback fast, which I think has allowed us to iterate well. And that has been tremendous to just like, it is quite a different experience to do a demo on a laptop next to someone and they go, I don't get it. And that really hits you deep in your heart in a way that even like a Zoom call doesn't. Yeah. And, that level of feedback, is both motivating and, it just gets you where you need to be faster than otherwise. We certainly do a lot of the standard tactics of we are trying to show up in the AI search. We are trying to show up in traditional search. We are doing some paid. We are doing these different things. But, doing podcasts and, this type of media, I think has been tremendously positive. We have, we try to differentiate this as face versus faceless content. So, face content is you've heard my voice, you sign up for Nowatowa. Maybe you don't buy right now, but you get our newsletter. If you read our newsletter that we get, put a lot of time into it, it is very much in my voice. It is not in the AI smoothed out corporate voice. It is deliberately in my voice. And we try to have that. We're trying to live, what we're suggesting to people, which is that if it's face content, it's, persuasive, it has a point of view. And if it's faceless, it's probably going to be served by the AI instead of you. And it's not going to push your business forward.
Right. Are you at the point of cloning yourself yet and making like some cloned YouTube shorts or something?
Not yet. Well, I have used the script, which does at least individual words to flip your voice. Like
HeyGen's really good.
Oh, cool. I don't try that.
Yeah, I was mucking around with some automation today because like yourself, like podcasts are great. They're awesome. They're super time consuming, especially if you're also the one doing all your demos as well. And so how do I train an AI to leverage that and be me for just a second on a YouTube short? Hey guys, what's up? Check this out, boom, and then it just goes to something else. There's a couple of people who I know that are doing this, and it's working wonders for them. And I know them personally, and I can't tell when it's them or AI. It's insane. So maybe check out HeyGen. Okay, that's going to take up a lot of your time. How receptive are people to jumping on a podcast with you?
Very. So I do most of my outreach through LinkedIn, and I do it all custom. I still by hand, do my pitches. And I found that works a lot better, even if people have an email or something like, hey, contact us to be on the podcast or a forum or something, to still do that. But then also connect with them on LinkedIn and just say hey, liked your podcast, was interested in coming on. I did fill out the form, but just wanted to connect because I think what you're doing is good. And, it does tend to be, there's a lot of AI marketing podcasts that have, come up recently, and that's definitely our ICP. So it's just really clicks in that way.
Yeah, you picked the right time, right thing. Okay. How else are you using AI in your day-to-day in terms of your workflows? Are you sending emails with AI? Are you drafting your newsletters with AI first and doing what's the AI tool that you're using the most these days?
Honestly, Cursor. I don't know if you're a developer.
I'm an AI developer, as in I ask AI to do something for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we started this conversation off as sort of hey, what's the genesis of this? And, that was all true. But I think in the background as well, being a software developer, it is astonishing the changes that have happened in the software development world due to AI that have had a profound impact on search, and have had a profound impact on just workflow and productivity. I have a few friends that, made a living doing coursework for you want to learn React. I wrote this course, and they were quite successful. And almost all of their search traffic has died. In the same way people talk about Stack Overflow, don't really want to go on Stack Overflow. And a lot of this is transcending even search intent, where it's not, there used to be a lot of search intent for how do I write a JavaScript loop? How do I do this basic thing? And now so much of that has become task intent, where I don't even search for that concept this we talk about the synthesis of the top 5 links as a skill. I think the other skill that everyone has is this abstraction and then recontextualization. So I'm actually working on something maybe I'm trying to get through a loop of here's the top podcast that I want to reach out to. Well, if I ask Google about that, I don't ask it how do I do JavaScript to get podcasts? I ask what's a JavaScript loop? And with ChatGPT and the services, you take that chunk of code and you paste it in, and you're fix this code, and then it does it, and then you paste it back into your stuff. And then with Cursor, you actually just highlight it and you hit Command K and you say fix it, and then it just fixes it. And there's no search done, there's no leaving that's done. And I use that as sort of this is the leading edge of what everything is going to be. And we talk about search fracturing into things. And we're starting to see this, which is that I want to get a list of target podcasts to be on. I could certainly go out do a Google for that, pull the data back, put it into a spreadsheet, or I could go directly in the spreadsheet and like it's tied in with Gemini. And I just say like, hey, give me the top like 100 podcasts here, list them out. I could go to deep research and say, hey, run this, and I've done this, get me this list. And then like it just throws it into a sheet. And those are the kind of things that you can't like SEO optimize your way around. There's no like, oh, I need to make the title a little bit more descriptive or add another keyword to the meta description here. Like this is a whole new game. And I think that was definitely part of our genesis was just recognizing that something new was happening here and that, had a courtside seat to it before, it actually went mainstream.
Yeah, I remember mucking around remember when on Twitter vibe coding was going insane because the Levels was building his game out, right? And so everybody became a vibe code gamer. I built some sort of tank game and I remember doing Command K and it was easy. And it was fun, and I'd never coded a single thing in my life. And then what really changed my game when, like, instead of typing out trying to think of something, typing the prompt, rereading it. Now with Whisperflow, I don't know if you use that either. It's just push a button, verbal vomit what I'm thinking, and then it turns it into a prompt, and it's incredible. So I use Whisperflow all day, every day. I can't remember the last time I typed on a keyboard. Like I'll literally say hello, push to talk on Whisperflow. It's ridiculous. What are some other interesting experiments that you're cooking up at the minute?
So I've always been really interested in content engineering, background in marketing and software development. And so marketing is, of course, like, oh, well, I write this content. It's educational. People find it useful. Content engineering is like the basis level is like a calculator. Like I'm going to do these things for you. So in the same way that you could write a blog post that says like, check these 10 things, you could write an application. And I think a lot of these are very applicable to vibe coding, that people could run the same thing. It will just automatically check those 10 things for you. And what I've really found is that content engineering projects occupy a different place in people's heads because they're tools, not articles. And so they're much more likely to share them. They're much more likely to recommend them. They're much more likely, they just go viral, quote unquote, much easier. So we have an AI search console tool that we're going to be releasing this week. I don't know when this podcast is going to be released, but by the time you hear this, it'll be out, which, checks whether or not your site can be indexed by all the different search services. And it's nothing you couldn't sit down and write a curl script and get the user agents and do yourself, but we make it very easy. We explain like what's happening at each step. We explain the degree of confidence we have in our like simulated test and things. So that's something we're going to release. And we still have a freemium offering, which has been quite good, which is you just go to Nowatowa's site, put your URL in of your own site, and we'll give you like a report of like how you show up in a couple ChatGPT questions and some of these other pieces. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Are you ready for a new segment, a lightning round of questions?
Sure.
I just want you to try and answer them whatever comes to mind.
I had this morning, Russell.
All right. What's your go-to AI tool right now that you can't live without? You kind of said that already.
Yeah, Cursor. And I've been popping between the latest version of Gemini and the latest version of Claude, because you can choose your model in it. And those have both been fantastic.
If you only had to pick one, which one would you pick?
Right now, Gemini, I think it's just a little better.
Okay. What's the most overhyped AI claim you've heard recently?
I think, was it Brilliance? Was the company that Microsoft turned out to be, 700 Indian coders in a warehouse doing work instead. I think that's it. I don't know if we still know the full story there, only because, I don't know if they were doing work that was then being, put into an AI or to what degree that was assisted and kind of things. So, but I thought that was a funny sort of story of like just how far off things can be still.
Yeah, this thing's AI, but it's, 1,000 people just furiously coding in the back.
Yeah, all in a trench coat. Yeah.
Is that a real question? What's the most underappreciated use of AI in marketing today?
I think the most underappreciated use is still Grammarly. I think Grammarly is a tremendous tool. It doesn't get enough recognition as an AI tool, but their latest versions of it and their pro versions of it are really helpful in terms of, keeping a lot of like tonal mistakes, doing a lot more of like a higher level copy edit than just spelling and grammar. And I think that you need to be a substantial size company now to have a copy editor in your thing that's overlooking everything. But just having that and to have an actual brand voice, I think is tremendous.
Shout out the OG Grammarly.
Yeah.
Never thought you'd say that one. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. What part of SEO do you think AI is going to completely flip on its head if it hasn't already?
I don't know if saying all of it is too much, but number one thing I think that AI has done is that it has broken Google search monopoly. And at the very least, it's broken Google's 10 blue links. Like this was the final nail in the coffin for it, where 10 years from now, I'm sure it'll still be around in some form, but it's not going to be the predominant way that people interact with these services. And we need to update our game, because Google has changed theirs, where they have fundamentally changed both the user experience of this, as well as I think the sort of implicit agreement with the open web of like, we will index you and then we will send you traffic. I think they are playing a new game now where they will index you and maybe send you some traffic, but a lot more is just going to live inside of themselves. I don't know if you saw the thing about Shopify and ChatGPT, where there's just e-commerce results showing up inside of ChatGPT and you don't need to go to a website. I think Google looks at that with envy and they look at that as, oh, this is how we're going to make this quarter's revenue numbers. It's going to become increasingly pay to play and more competitive in those ways. Another term we've been using internally is sightless SEO, which is the goal is not to even have people hit our website. The goal is for them to buy. And so we need to do all of these activities that are outside of our website. And so it's this sightless SEO strategy.
That's really interesting. Can you break that down a little bit more? So you're saying that you see a world where people won't even land on our homepage anymore. It'll all be done within, let's say, like a ChatGPT search window. I'll ask, give me the best motivational book. And instead of being directed to the Amazon listing or whatever, it's just right there. I can buy it, bang. And then I never even know what website I bought that off unless I really look at some sort of URL or something.
Yeah. Well, and I probably sound like a crazy person saying that, like, oh, that's like real far out there. But I think a real interesting to look at is look at Google, look at what their local search looks like, look at how many searches actually happen inside of like their Google Maps app of like, oh, I'm in a new city. I just landed. What's a restaurant that's nearby? And they list restaurants. It's all happens within Google, essentially pay to play. They have e-commerce services now that are essentially like you just give them an e-commerce feed and then you pay with Google Pay and then stuff shows up at your house. You don't really leave their ecosystem. And if you're a Google executive and you look at local and you look at the e-commerce business, then you look at this like open web search stuff, you're like, we're leaving money on the table. And I think that's a real tenuous place for us to build our businesses on. And the only direction to go is that more and more of that becomes pay to play and more competitive, or that it fractures and that ChatGPT takes this over. And it is such early days for all of this. And what I mean by that is Apple still has not released like the real AI product. Like, I hear crazy things about how much money they are spending on building a protected, secure system just to launch their AI stuff. Like huge new data centers and all this effort hasn't even been launched yet. Meta has barely launched their stuff. There's now, Meta AI inside of WhatsApp. So right there, it's in front of 1 billion people a day, and it's crazy. We don't really have good stats about this stuff. It's all fractured. It's all going all these different weird ways. But yeah, the end goal of all of this is to disrupt Google, all these different services.
Yeah, I just hope as a user of AI, right now it's like $20 a month or whatever. I just hope, with the energy consumptions and blah, 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 I just hope we don't see a day where it's $2,000 a month because of the usage or something.
Well, my prediction is this is going to go the opposite way, which is that I think it's an anomaly we're paying anything right now. I think the much more likely occurrence is that this is essentially going to be a free service for everybody and that it's going to be ad supported, in that direction. And then what we have now is like a premium, like HBO version of this. And the real widely adopted version of this is going to be like YouTube, where it's just a lot of ads and there's a lot of other stuff in it. To the energy consumption thing, I think, again, this is really early days for I'm not the deepest technologist on this. I'm much more of like a software developer than an AI developer. But, I talked about Nowatowa being founded as kind of like a joke. All of the AI stuff, some of the core technologies were literally founded as like bar bets, that there were two researchers drinking after a conference. And that's how they came up with generative AI. And some of the core models is like, I bet you couldn't do it that way. Like, I think I could. And, the hardware was never designed for this in a lot of cases. The systems, the technology. And that's why I say it's such early days. Google did release, like in this last week, Google I/O was 2 weeks ago. Like as part of that, there are AI models that run in your browser, that run local to your devices. And there is, even setting aside any improvements in the actual models, we mentioned Cursor. Cursor does a lot with stacking models and having a model that chooses which model to go to. So you have this giant application with like 1,000 files in it. It doesn't pass 1,000 files up every time. There's a little model that sort of figures out the context and then packages that up. And then like you've asked 100 questions so far in a session. Well, it summarizes those and then it passes that up to Gemini, to the expensive model, and then gets it back, and then it interprets it, then it passes it to a tool. And it does this whole dance of, energy consumption and, speed and thought. And I think there is still huge amounts of value in the broadest sense of it to be gained just by improved user experiences on top of all these AI tools. And again, so much of this was an accident. So much of this was just like cobbled together. It's just going to get so much better, so much more rapidly than I think we can even imagine.
I think that might be a good place to wrap it up there. So what I'm going to
All right.
That's food for thought for a lot of people. Hey, Mike, before we wrap it up, what's coming up? Is there anything coming up for Nowatowa? Is there any new features that you're about to release? I think you mentioned something earlier at the top of the show.
Yeah, I think the AI Search Console is tremendously helpful. It's a great starting point for people to get going with at least considering AI search and how their sites are visible. And it's free. So why not give it a shot?
Okay. And then I always ask before every guest goes, if you had to give a founder one piece of advice, what would you give them?
This feels cliche, but talk to people. I mentioned going to conferences as incredibly high bandwidth feedback. And that's really been the case where, to get every conference we've gone to, I feel like has jumped our progress forward months of effort of, even at the very least, talking to people, finding about what they really care about and what they point to, and then not going down, development roads and then finding out people don't care about those features. So it's really hard to go wrong talking to more people.
All right, Mike, that was an awesome chat. You gave incredible insights there. For those who want to learn more about Nowatowa, are you able to give us the website to go to and where they connect with you on LinkedIn?
Please connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also email me at mike@Nowatowa, and please go to Nowatowa. It's KNOWATOA, Nowatowa. So like knowledge and Krakatoa smashed together into a non-copyright word that we don't have to fight for a domain for. That's it.
Was it AI generated?
I went through a lot of AI permutations, but it's kind of fun to say, even if it's a bit of a weird name. But yeah,
that's true. I'll drop the links in the notes below. But this has been the Scale Forward podcast. I'm your host, Russell. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Mike, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. This was great.